Hi everyone, this is Eitan from HandheldSound, and today we're going to look at our new installment to our Mad drum kit library, Mad RockScore. The name sort of gives it away. It's a new drum kit library that really blends nicely with your orchestra. We were experimenting with the concept of cinematic drum kits for a while, and especially how to make them more flexible. That meant two main things. First, it was solving the obvious problem with recording drums in large rooms, which results in lots of reverb that then you somehow need to control. And the second thing was customizing the signal flow to get more usability from that space. So, for instance, now in the mixer, you'll be able to do things like re-level the cymbals and hi-hats from within the stereo overheads channel, use the room mics as auxiliary sands, and have total control over mic bleed so you can customize how everything blends in. Okay, let's get to it. We've got 3 new kits, all recorded in the same room, which was a 4,000 square foot scoring room, and this is what they sound like. Okay, so the first one we've got here is called Piper. It's a 1970s Ludwig 5-piece. Okay, so now let's listen to some pre-recorded loops with Piper. By the way, the library comes with over 500 of loops overall. Okay, now let's switch over to the next kit, which is called Haze. This is a 1950s WFL, and if I'm not wrong, that's the same company that made Ludwig before it became Ludwig. Okay, let's play some loops with Haze. And here's something featuring more of the toms. Okay, next up is Umber, which is the most modern drum kit in the library. It's circa 2000. It's a Mayer Brothers. Okay, and some loops with Umber. Okay, let's switch back to Haze. So we recorded lots of articulations, and they're pretty much identical across all kits. The first thing that should jump right out is the sense that there is so much detail within the room across all the velocities, all the dynamic ranges. The default mixer settings really give a good sense of space, and you can hear it in the snare drum. Even the hi-hat. Now I can quickly take almost all the room sound out with one of the snapshots. And it's only mixer settings that were changed. We didn't play with envelopes or gates or anything like that. So in terms of articulations, there's a lot of variety. Starting from the kick drum. We actually have two kick pedals. We have a medium one and a soft one. And we have a kick in and kick out situation here. The mixer has flippable channels, so the kick and snare have, the kick has kick in, kick out, and the snare has snare top and snare bottom that you can individually control. So from the kick drum, we move to the snare. So the snare, we have a full octave of articulations, and the way we've sampled it is uniquely for the left and the right hands. So it's mirror. So the left side is the left hand samples, right hand is on the right side, and then you go from the center all the way to the rim. So you can actually perform quite easily really believable snare performances by basically alternating left and right hand just like a real drummer would. And the fact that it goes center to rim really helps you understand the zone where you're playing on the snare drum, which can produce quite a versatile amount of tones. And of course, lots of velocities, 4 round robins throughout. And we have our buzz roll. And we have some unique articulations on the snare with grace notes. Instead of needing to perform the grace notes individually, we actually have sampled grace notes that you access via Legato. So when you hold a key and play adjacent keys, it plays your grace notes. So it's kind of cool to perform that live. And if you practice a little bit, you don't have to really enter all that manually. stuff like that. So then we also have in the snare, we have two different side sticks. This is the kind of side stick that hits the side of the rim. And this is a more traditional side stick where the stick is towards the center. Now, when it comes to the dynamic range and volume distribution across all velocities, the lowest velocities are still very audible, so you always hear a defined hit even at the lowest dynamic level, which is great when you're trying to perform underscore or otherwise gentle thematic passages. So even though the musical dynamics are very wide, they stay authentic to the instrument because we didn't really conflate actual dynamics that we sampled with additional volume modulation. Okay, we've got hi-hat and cymbals next. Okay, so talking about the hi-hat, we sampled multiple articulations, starting from where the stick is really on the edge of the bell to get that tight sound, and then we went all the way to the edge of the hi-hat. So on this one, you can modulate this with the mod wheel to fully open the hi-hat. And it also adds an automatic foot stomp when you fully close the mod wheel that also responds to velocity and goes louder if you close it faster. Now, we also sampled the foot stomp separately and also a variety of half opens, but then we did something else with that foot stomp, and we added an automatic foot stomp sample whenever you play a pattern of open closed, because that's really what happens when a drummer plays an open close pattern. The first time they close the hi-hat, they have to press that pedal. So if you notice, if I do an open close pattern, on the first time I close the hi-hat, you'll hear that foot stomp along with the actual closed sampled hit. Which really helps make it super realistic when you play open close, open close. Then we also have some automatic open close that you can integrate into groove building. Next we have our cymbals. The cymbals are all on the black keys. And just like with everything, we sampled multiple articulations from each one. We have 2 crashes and a ride, and we've put the different articulations from each one on adjacent keys so they're easily performable. And then we also have a choke key that will muffle the cymbals, all the cymbals from one key. and it has its own velocity, sensitivity, and round robins and all that. But it also tracks the speed by which you muffle the cymbal to give you a different treatment for that. So here's a fast one, and slow. And there you go. Okay, we finally got to the toms. So with the toms, just like the snare, we've sampled individual left hand and right hand samples, and we've put them right next to each other in a mirror-like fashion so they can be easily performed. And we have off-centers, edges, and rims on all the toms. And it really brings out the sense of the room. So maybe it's a good time to bring the mixer a little bit. And we'll talk about the room and outriggers perspectives. And first, let's hear how this sounds dry. So right now we're just hearing the spot mics and the overheads. I'm going to bring out the room. And the outriggers. And a combination of both. Now let's hear it with, let's flip to Haze and hear the difference here. So first we'll get this completely dry. Room. Outriggers. And both. And of course the room and the outriggers coming out on all channels, but there's a way to control that we'll see very soon. So you can hear that room on across all the channels. Now, there's a really cool feature that we can add that is right here. It's the velocity offset. So that is a way to control the dynamics of anything you're playing, whether you're just playing it from the keyboard or something that you already have in your DAW. You can easily control the dynamics to perform crescendo and diminuendo without really working hard. So let's play this groove with the toms. I'm going to bring the room and outriggers to kind of like a medium low, and let's play this, and then I will change the dynamics as I go. So now we have a diminuendo, and this is not changing volume. This is only working with the dynamics that we sampled. Even in the lowest velocities, you have full articulation on this. Of course, if I put more of the room mics, they really sink through. Okay, so let's dive deeper into the mixer now. Okay, I'm going to use Umber for that. And the mixer has all the traditional controls with individual channel strips for each microphone perspective, the kick in, kick out, which are flippable. Same with the snare top and bottom, hi-hat, toms. Umber doesn't have tom 2, so it's got tom 1 and floor tom. That's why tom 2 is grayed out. And then we have our 3 stereo mic perspectives, the overheads, room, and outriggers. And of course, you've got volume control, pans, solo mute, and optional bus outs if you want to use the individual outputs from Contact. But there are other features here, extended features that really go beyond what you can do with traditional signal flow, especially around the room and outriggers, because we can use them either as regular channels where they affect the entire kit. So if I play the kit and then I raise the room channel, it'll affect all the elements equally, just like you would expect from a mixer, right? But then, if you notice here, we've got these little knobs here, and those are auxiliary knobs. So the room and outriggers can actually serve either as global channels or as master auxiliary returns, which means we can send different channels to the room and outriggers and basically use them as if they're reverb units, the actual sound from the room. And you can do that basically by just lowering the level on the auxiliary. By default, if I go to the snapshot, by default, the mixer loads as traditional, which means all the auxiliaries are at max unity gain so that the room and outriggers are operating as just regular global channels. But you can either lower their level and then raise these up to near 0 or 0. Or if you're lazy, you can just click on either dynamic room or starter room and you'll have a good starting point. Now you can see the auxiliaries are at different levels and the room and outriggers are at max levels. So it kind of sounds similar because this is then brought down in certain areas. If you can see, the kick doesn't have a lot of room, but then other elements like hi-hat has more room. But here's the cool thing. We've got actually 2 auxiliaries, and these are color-coded. This is like the mustard, kind of mustard? Yeah. Mustard color and the green color, and these are all lining up. So we can actually have individual auxiliaries for the room and outriggers. So if I want to have no snare in the room and, well, in this case in the outriggers, I'm going to turn it down. And then let's see if there's anything here. No. So now let's bring the snare up in both the room and outriggers. And so now you've got a kit that behaves as if it's recorded in with a reverb unit, which is kind of cool. So you're not limited by the fact that this was a kit that was recorded in a huge space. You can actually tailor it to have that dynamic flexibility, which is super cool. Now, the next thing that we have here, along the same notion, is something that we can do for the overhead. So one of my biggest struggles with overheads is that once you record it, usually it's a stereo signal, then it basically affects all the kit at the same way. So if you want to change the volume of just the cymbals, then your hi-hat and toms kind of disappear. Well, this helps with that because you can re-level your hi-hat and cymbals from within the overheads channel. So you can potentially have no hi-hat and no cymbals in the overheads, and the rest of the kit will shine through. So that really helps to have a lot of overhead sound, let's say, but without a ton of cymbals or a ton of hi-hat, which really helps with mixing. Of course, you also have these little auxiliary knobs that are color-coded, so you can actually send the hi-hat and the cymbals to the room and outriggers individually. So that's a crazy mixing concept, because why would you do that? Well, it really helps if you lower the level of the overheads, but then you want to have a lot of spill over to the room and outriggers. You can do that just by raising these auxiliary sends, so to speak. Next is right here is our bleed network. We'll touch on that in a second. Right here we have pitch control. So you can either have global pitch or pitching just the kick and the snare. Next to it is decay. If you really want to control your sound further, you can actually lower the decay. And this is an algorithmic decay, so it doesn't lower all the elements equally, because that would be kind of crazy. So even if you go all the way down, you can have gated effects, or if you don't have a lot of room, you can actually have a very, very tight sound. Here I can flip to a sound that has actually no reflections. And I can lower the decay. So you have a really controlled. Very dry, and it's the same kit in the same huge room, which is kind of cool. Okay, now finally, let's talk about the mic bleed matrix. So why did we go nuts with this, and what is it? Well, the easiest way to explain this is that mic bleed is the sound a microphone picks up from an indirect or otherwise unintended sound source. And in particular, it's relevant to spot mics or anything close mic'd. When you record drums, mic bleed is inevitable, and it's just one of those things that makes recording drums challenging and so versatile. So when we produce this library, instead of baking that sound into the samples, we give you the ability to control almost every aspect of mic bleed across all spot mics. And in return, it rewards you with a lot more sonic mileage from each of the kits. So let's check it out. Okay, so our bleed section right here, it's really those two knobs which are multifunctional. When you press this button, you cycle through all the modes, and each mode basically introduces a different aspect of mic bleed into the signal. For instance, SD-K is snare drum through the kick out microphone. So right now we have a good sense of space. The room and outriggers are set as auxiliaries, and the overhead is quite low. So if I add snare through the kick out, I get that extra thickness on the snare. And I can do the same thing to the hi-hat. That extra low end that you otherwise can't get. Tom through kick, and you have the floor tom as well. Those will really thicken up the toms. You can do that to the floor tom as well. And then we have the cymbals through the kick. and then it laps around. The other knob gives you even more options. Kick through snare, that's probably the most identifiable mic bleed demonstration. If I go to snapshot and use our sealed snapshot, which really is the driest you can get these drums to sound. Okay, so if I bring the kick through the snare drum, you hear the rattling of the wires of the snares, which is really how we're used to hearing the kick. This sounds way unnatural. Let's bring it back to dynamic room. Drop the overheads a little bit. The next one is kick through floor tom. That'll bring some low-end rumble to the kick, basically making the floor tom sing through the kick, which can be useful sometimes, especially if you have some low tempo type stuff. Then we have tom through snare and tom through floor tom, all kinds of stuff. Floor tom through snare, so you can have that extra rattling if you want. And then floor tom through tom 1. Basically, you've got a lot of different options to introduce little nuances to the signal, which may seem very minute, but once you build an arrangement and also when you do some layering, then it really adds up to give you some flavor and sonic material that you can't really do with EQ. So let me play through some pre-recorded loops here, and I'll change a bunch of settings in the mixer so we can see how much flavor we can get. Okay, so if I had to summarize the biggest strength of Mad RockScore, it would be adaptability. From intimate and articulate to cinematic with so many different flavors, recording drums is complex and it's probably the most complex instrument to record, which opens the door to a lot of interpretation. Because of how widely different RockScore can sound without losing the rawness of it, it can really become your go-to in many situations. Okay, that's all we've got time for today. Don't forget to check out our website for more audio demos and information, and I'll catch you here on the next one.